We'll see how this goes. Jared did so well with it, I'm going to try walking around. Since this is ostensibly a security conference, I want to start with a question. How many people here say their day-to-day job is security? Okay. Now, it's a trick question. How many people here would say your day-to-day job is actually managing risk within your organization? Right, and that's what we're going to try and get to today. So we probably all recognize that risk is really what we're talking about. Risk is the language of business. What I'm here to talk about today is most people in the organization don't understand and don't think of it in those terms. So we're going to try and give you that perspective. We talk about security, and people think we're security guys, so we say we're the no guys, right? And the reason we're the no guys is because the only secure server is the one that's in a room in the basement disconnected, right? Everybody knows that story. Well, the server in the basement locked away in a room is of no value to the organization. So there's no reason to talk about a secure server because it's either a useless server or it's an insecure server. There's no decision to be made. And the business is all about making decisions. So let's talk about managing the risk of that server. How much risk are you going to put in order to get value out of that server? So that's why I try and say we never talk about security in my team. We're not security people, we're risk people. We're helping to give risk information to the business so the business can now make risk-based decisions. A couple other foundational pieces we're going to talk about. I would contend that individuals, so you and me, people, our natural state is to not change. Now, I know a lot of people like to say, I'm a change agent, I love innovation, I'm the guy that does change in my organization. It says the natural state of people is to not change, and you're overcoming that for other reasons, and we'll talk a bit about why that is. We're going to talk about the organizations themselves are in a dynamic environment. Everything is changing. There's always a new competitor, there's always a new company, there's always a new technology, there's always a new regulation coming out. So the organizations have to change in order to take advantage of those new opportunities. They also have to change in order to defend against those new challenges that are coming out. Now think about an organization is actually made up of us, the people. Organization has to change in a dynamic environment. People, we don't like to change. That's what initially creates the friction. So that is the challenge we have in our organizations. People don't want to change. The organization has to change. And I would say that the risk language is one of the mechanisms we can use to facilitate what that change is. So when I say people don't like change, and even though if you get your hackles up, I'm a facilitator for change, I would say no matter which branch of science you talk about, every branch of science would tell you nobody likes change. We'll talk about biology. Organisms, from the smallest all the way up to the largest mammals, every animal tries to resist expending energy. Right? Everybody wants to stay static. I was down at it's a wild bird sanctuary just east of Lethbridge, and they have all these majestic eagles and falcons and owls, and they're just great birds. You should go down there just because it's cool to hang out with these birds. These birds they spend all their day on this little piece of rod stuck in the ground. And they have a little cable from their leg that goes to the rod. And I'm looking at that and I thought, this doesn't seem like a really healthy kind of a zoo. So I talked to the zookeeper and I said, I don't want to judge how you're taking care of these animals. Obviously, you're a professional. What's with the cables? Like, don't these birds want to be up flying around? They want to go soaring and look all over. They explained they're high metabolism animals. They want to stay here. The only reason they go up is because they need food. Once they get food, they come back down. If we feed them, they would never move. Natural state of an organism, at rest. If we look in a physics perspective, Newton's first law, body in motion tends to stay in motion. Body at rest stays at rest. Why? In order to change that state, you have to apply energy. The entire cosmos, based on the physical principle, nothing changes. That's the natural state. Now, I assume at some point in your life, you've probably seen this triangle up on the wall here, Maslow's hierarchy. The philosophers would agree. People will avoid effort. So we start at the bottom. This is a pyramid because fewer and fewer people achieve the different levels as you get to the top. So we start at the bottom, food, shelter, clothing, right? Everybody kind of needs those basics. Most of us try and get to safety. Further up, love is something we strive for. Not everybody achieves. Hardly anybody gets to self-actualization. So that is the effort that goes in so fewer and fewer people try. So even the philosophers, no matter what branch of science, I think there's enough foundation here to say that people basically like to stay where they are, don't want change, so we have to overcome that. Now, I assume you've all seen this traditional triangle. Has everybody seen the modified for the new generation? Now, aside from being funny, I think this is also very telling. So we have the traditional triangle. The very first thing we have, now what we added? We added Wi-Fi. Why? Because when you have food, shelter, and clothing, the very first thing you have to do is take a picture of it and send it out to the internet so everybody knows what you're eating, what you're wearing, and what you're sitting in while you do all of that. But it's very telling that what we added was Wi-Fi. We didn't add internet. because we don't want to walk over to the computer to do this. We want to be lazy where we are. Apple has made an entire business of selling products that are very convenient, give us access to the internet. And then we add battery. Why? We don't want to walk over to the wall because I'm sitting in a chair, I'm eating food. I want to be on the internet, I want to be convenient. So I think this just bolsters my argument. Our natural state is to be lazy. And that's everybody in our organization. And that's not a negative. I don't mean that as a pejorative. Let's recognize that people don't want to change. So what we have to do for our organizations is give them the tools to facilitate the change. So we get into risk. Why do I talk about risk? So we all know the formula, probability times impact. Don't have to talk about that much. If we put that into a picture, now the picture is a bit complex, but I think we can understand it pretty easily. All the red stuff is bad, all the green stuff is good. So all the best pictures in the world, red bad, green good. So risk is the line in the middle, and basically what's going to happen is you will go forward on something when you think you're in the green. So when the probability of success is past the middle, that means good, I'm going to go forward. So that's how the decision gets made. Right? It's pretty obvious on how it's going to happen. The challenge is, how do you figure out that line? Challenge is another way of saying effort. So it's going to be tricky to figure that out. So how am I going to figure out where I should be on that curve? It's going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to figure that out perfectly. We're probably not going to do that. So what we end up with is uncertainty. So I'm not sure exactly where I am on that curve. Now, how many times have you heard this? I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm just going to guess high. Or how many times do you make a business decision and you say, I'm going to take the most conservative approach? What you're doing is you're adding uncertainty into that formula. That band of purple, we'll call that the opportunity tax. So you could be having all the profit that's in yellow, you're giving up. And all you get now is that little bit of green because you're not going to say yes until you're very certain this is going to go your way. And this is what happens when we choose the most conservative approach. When I'm not certain how to do it, I don't want to put in the effort, and you don't make the decision, you're losing out on all this opportunity. The competitor across the street that is willing to take a gamble, is willing to take more risk, they're getting all of that yellow profit, and you're not getting any of it. Now this is recognized, this happens because of our natural state. People don't like to do the change. So we have to get over this, give them the tools to facilitate beyond that. Okay. So we'll turn this into an example. So the formula, risk, probability, impact, we like to use numbers, so we'll put it into a number. How many people have gone through this kind of a scenario? Somebody comes to you with a proposal. I want to spend a bunch of money on something, maybe we're not sure how this is going to turn out. Now the conservative person, when we don't know what the probability of success is, our natural tendency is to assume the worst. So if this is what are the chances it's going to fail? Our natural initial tendency is to say 100%. It's going to 100% fail. And that means I'm going to lose all of my investment. Why would I spend $50,000 to lose it all? I'm probably not going to do that. But if you think of the reality, what are the odds it's going to fail 100% of the time? Right? Never happens. What if the probability was 50-50? 50% chance it might work, 50% chance it might not. The way you run this formula, $50,000 investment, I'm not going to do it, is actually a $25,000 investment. Would you be willing to do it for $25,000? It's a very different question. And all we've done is said, think about what the actual probability is. The probability is not 100%, which is our natural tendency when we take the worst case. Okay? So just an example of how that works on the probability side. If we look on the impact side, and I always like this one. So a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear? Well, what is the probability that a tree falls in the forest? 100%. A tree falls in the forest every day of the year, always going to happen. Nobody was in the forest to hear it, there is no impact. When we're in a conservative environment, when we're uncertain, we tend to overstate what the impact is going to be. How many times have you heard somebody with a proposal, we need to make this change? Oh, last time we did it, Bill in accounting, that guy was upset. There's no way we can get Bill upset. Or how many times will you have heard, yeah, the president, he hates that idea, we're not going to do it. Right? Those are all the conservative reasons you're overstating what the impact is. The impact is almost certainly less than what you think it is. In this reality of a tree falling, everybody, oh, tree fell, that's enormous. Why? What does it matter? And ask that really hard question about the impact all the time. What does it really matter? Chances are it doesn't really matter in the short term. Right? So in this case, the risk formula, the risk is zero. Go ahead, go walking in the forest. Tree's going to fall, you're not going to hear it. Right? That's okay. Right? Now, we had numbers in there. Because this is a formula, risk, probability, impact, feels like we should have numbers, right? We want to add a whole bunch of numbers. We want to come up with exactly how much it is, 3 degrees of precision. Doesn't make any sense. The worst thing you can do in trying to do a risk calculation is spend a ton of time to work out the risk. As an organization, we need to move quickly, and we need to be prepared to change when we made the wrong decision. And it's okay to make the wrong decision as long as you recognize it and you change. Don't be beholden to the decisions you make. Be ready to change, but do it with a mind's eye to what the risk is and what the actual risk is. Right? So a lot of organizations are going to go through and they're going to say, I can't do this anymore because it's not the right thing. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't go. Go. Go quickly and be ready to change when you discover more information. One of the most important things you're going to find out is whatever decision you make today is based on the information you have today. Tomorrow, you've got more information and new information. Whatever decision you made today is probably not what you're going to make a year from now, is definitely not what you made 2 years from now. It's okay. You're going to make a different decision. Be prepared for that. So, an example from my company, how do we put this into action? I said we're using the risk vocabulary to allow people for change. So a couple years ago, we got a new president. He came in, stood up in front of everybody, town hall. Everybody was excited. He comes back and he says, all right, we are a new company. We've been too conservative for too long. We're not taking advantage of opportunities. We're missing out on a lot of information, a lot of that opportunity tax. So he says, we are going to be agile and we are going to accept more risk. And that was great, and everybody's excited. Yes, agile, accept more risk. Simple, I know what we're doing. And then everybody starts to put it into action. And everybody hears something different. Some people, oh, this is the project I've always wanted to do that they always said no, I'm going to do it because I'm agile. Somebody said, oh, well, nobody said cost. He didn't say we're going to be agile, risk tolerant, and conservative on our costs. So we're going to do whatever the project is, spend whatever the money is. Everybody heard something different. Everybody interpreted something different. So we were excited, and all that enthusiasm, everybody was willing to change, so we were moving in the right direction. We moved all in different directions. And everybody became afraid, and everybody became concerned and conservative. So what happened? It turns out agile and high risk are not clear. It seemed like they were clear. Nice, simple, concise words. You put it into action. I don't know what that means. I don't know terms for uncertainty, and uncertainty is that risk tax. So now all of a sudden everybody turns into your natural state. When you get to uncertain, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do nothing. And everybody stopped and slowed down. So this is exactly what happened in the organization. We had a good sprint, and then everything folded in again. And we had to come up with mechanisms to get people over that. All right. So we'll give some examples. How many people have ever heard this? Like, we're going through staff reductions. Probably everybody here has had to live through this. And you say, well, we need to reduce staff. The very first thing you'll hear, what if we get rid of the wrong guy? Maybe. So if we're going to reorganize, how many people here have been through a reorganization? How many people have been here through more than one reorganization in the same organization? Right? So what are the chances that you make things worse? Could happen. Right? You're going to go through, well, we need to move to mobile. We need to move into the internet. We need to do a bunch of new things. And you hear all of these things that are, well, here's why we can't. These are all the reasons why we can't do it. That's why I can't go forward and make those decisions. Right? Basically, those are all euphemisms for, I'm afraid to change. I am uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't move forward. Humans' natural tendency, when they're uncertain, don't move forward. The organization absolutely needs us to move forward. So that's where this challenge comes from. So an example here. We talk about reorganization. So I'd asked how many people, everybody put up their hand, everybody's lived through a reorg. And then I asked how many people have gone through 2 reorgs in the same organization. Most of you put up your hand again. So what does that tell us? You made the wrong decision on the reorg. That's okay. Right? The impact of that reorg, you've all lived through it. You're all still working. So the impact is not as big as we think it's going to be. That's an example where people look at the impact. Oh, but if we get the reorg wrong, it's terrible. It's not terrible. We've all lived through it. It's unfortunate. It's uncomfortable. But you'll get through it, and you'll be able to move on. Now, the other reality is, we talk about a dynamic environment. Your organization has made a decision on what the reorg is based on today's information. Tomorrow, there's a new competitor. Next year, there's a new technology. 2 years from now, there's a new opportunity. Whatever org structure you've picked isn't going to be the right org structure in the long term. That's okay. So recognize that the impact, when you think it's bad, is not nearly as bad as you think it's going to be. Now, the other language we're using here, remember we talked about the formula, risk is probability times impact, but we don't want to talk numbers. Most of the people in your organization that aren't you and aren't in finance aren't number people. They can't do 3 degrees of precision on a risk calculation. So the language that we're using here, pretty high, pretty low. right? That's all you need to make a business decision. When you think of the number of decisions your executive team make every day, they aren't looking at 3 degrees of precision, and they aren't comparing things out to millions of dollars plus and minus. They're like, yeah, it looks pretty good. I don't like it today. That's realistically how decisions are made in the business. So these are the language we use. When you're talking the probability and the impact side, low, medium, high, that's all you need. And then when it comes to the risk side, awesome, I don't think I'm going forward with it. When you give that to the business, it is incredibly empowering. It's the business doesn't recognize that they're being held back by their conservatism. When you give them this and they're saying, well, if I have to calculate out risk, 3 degrees, that's going to take me 6 months, and I have to get some actuaries, and I have to do all this analysis. We've already said the organization needs to be agile. We need to move quickly. We can't spend a ton of time doing analysis. So don't sweat it. All you have to do is, everybody can tell you, is that going to be a big impact or a small impact? And when you get the uncertainty out of it, people, that's not so bad. Small impact, okay. What's the likelihood it's going to happen? It's probably going to happen. Okay, that's enough to do thumbs up, thumbs down. That is the language you give to your business people. That's the language they can use to move forward and be successful. So if we summarize and kind of wrap it all up, recognize that people are uncomfortable. That uncomfortable makes them conservative. That turns into uncertainty. When we remember the graph, uncertainty is that tax you pay on the risk. You're not going to make the right decision for maximizing profit in your company. You're going to miss out on a bunch of opportunity. Recognize why people are uncertain, take that out of the formula, and then move forward. Right? That's a tax that's going to slow down the company. Right? You have to consider the probability and the impact. People in general, when they're talking about probability, are going to assume 0 or 100%. Anything else is hard. So that's why we go low, medium, high. Don't worry about the numbers, but you have to think about probability. And remember that the impact is almost not going to be as bad as you think it is. Right? So that's the other important part. The risk of change isn't as bad as you think it is. We live through it all the time. We've had reorganizations, we've had different structures, we've had different jobs. You're probably in a company that's either been bought or sold or is doing something completely different than when you started there. Change is around us all the time. We're all still getting through it. It's uncomfortable because that's not our natural state. You're going to get through it. Now, the one at the bottom is also a very important thing to remember. So we're talking about risk. And what we're saying is you're going to accept risk, which means sometimes it's going to fail. As leaders, how are you going to treat it when somebody in your team made a decision and it went wrong? Are you going to slap them on the wrist? Why did you make a bad decision? Or are you going to slap them on the back? Congratulations, you tried to do the right thing for the company. Let's do better next time. One of my favorite examples of this last year, SpaceX, so Elon Musk's going to the Mars project. They had Facebook's billion-dollar satellite on the rocket, off the pad, off they go, whole rocket blows up. Horrible failure. Billions of dollars lost, lots of recriminations. Zuckerberg really upset. That afternoon, Elon Musk comes out, does a press release, and everybody's like, oh, he's going to talk about this failure and who's getting fired. Elon gets up and he says, that was a great success. And everybody's, what? And he said, we learned so much. He says, we learned from all of our failures so we get better the next time and we're prepared for the uncertainty next time. That is the kind of leader we want to be. You want to reward your people for taking the risks, but you also want to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes twice. Elon is a very good leader because he recognizes you learn from everything that happens, good and bad. He rewards the people for making the right decisions, even if the outcomes are incorrect. Right? So think about what kind of leader, what kind of example are you going to be, because it's also a natural tendency. Your boss may not be the right leader. And when your people make a mistake, is your boss going to come down on your head? You need to educate your boss about, hey, this is what risk is. Sometimes it goes wrong. It's okay. But make sure you don't do that to your people. Your people need to be held up and supported so that they do get over the uncertainty and the conservatism, and they do the right thing for the company. So I will leave that to you. So what is the risk? I would say the biggest risk is not moving fast enough, spending too much time being conservative, and not being prepared to change when you recognize you've gone the wrong direction. It's okay to admit your mistakes. It's okay to be better. And if it's uncomfortable admitting mistakes, just blame it on, well, the outside world has changed and I'm now adapting to the new thing. This is the language I'm trying to give you. Hopefully this works for your people. Talk to the business people. It worked really well for us. We're not finished with it. It's still a work in progress. But I would say we're seeing a lot of success and we're moving forward on a lot of initiatives with just this simple language of low, medium, high, and risk. The risk is go, no go. That's all I have. Thank you.